record. There we go. And we've got a fair bit of slide to go through, but these are fairly simple concepts. We're going to be talking about programming for the 4 goals. And again, we'll sort of touch base a little bit on how to start using Trainerize. So PTA Global is giving you these templates and these acute variable guidelines and things like that. And I do think there's a little bit of a learning curve on Trainerize. But if you take some time over the next couple of weeks or as you first start working with clients to get comfortable with that platform, I've gotten nothing but good feedback about it so far. So I think it might be worth kind of adding into what we're learning here. So if there are no further questions, then I will kick it off and pull up the slides. All right, can you see the programming for 4 goals now?
Yep.
Good, all right. I think it's just my face that doesn't cooperate. That's fine, you've seen enough of me at this point. Okay, all right, so we're gonna talk about programming for the 4 goals. We talk a lot about psychology and motivation and communication at the beginning of the program, and ultimately I do think that that's very important. But at the end of the day, your client is going to hire you not just because they like you, but also because they have a goal to reach. And so what we have to make sure that we're looking at is our responsibility to be delivering the program components that are going to help someone achieve their goal, right? Now, what always ends up happening when we're working with a client is that the client has a very large responsibility to actually implement the things that we're suggesting, okay? So I think what we have to understand the humanity of program design is that the perfect program, right down to the last micronutrient and second of rest, the most perfect program in the world still can fail if the client doesn't follow the program, if they don't do what you're recommending, if they don't make it into the gym, right? At the same time, if we spend all of our time coaching the human being and we're just trying to make sure they come to the gym and we're just trying to encourage them and we're just trying to help them with, choosing more vegetables and less processed foods, if we don't have the science of the program working correctly, by the time they are actually coming into the gym and they are actually doing the work, they can similarly not achieve their goal because we're not paying enough attention to the science side of things. So I would say that we sort of have to cover bases on both of those. But don't get so into the science of a program that you forget that you're dealing with a human being and not a computer, not a robot, right? So, with this whole section, I do a fair bit of trying to share stories about what it's like when I'm working with real clients. But a big part of the undertone of my story is that I started off with the program that was the right fit for helping them reach their goal. The reason why I bring that up is because in the industry, in my experience, I've worked with lots of trainers who have basically every client they see for the whole day doing the same workout, or they quickly write a workout on a napkin while they're eating lunch, or they don't even have a program at all. They just wander around the gym and see what's open and then make their client work out. So, we have to deal with the human being and we have to troubleshoot and we have to be encouraging. We have to find ways of helping them build a healthier lifestyle for sure. But what's underneath all of that should be a template or a guide in terms of our program that's actually going to match what they need in order to achieve success, right? So we're going to look at those kind of guidelines today. We've already looked at acute variables and we've done a lot on exercise progression and stuff like that. But now we sort of have to look at, well, what's different in a weight loss program than a wellness program, than a sports conditioning program, than a lean body mass program, okay? So this slide shows up a lot in the deck. I thought it would be smart to just pull it to the front and talk about it once and then move on from there. When we think about the factors that affect whether or not our client gets results, everything on the page here affects results. Some of them we can change, some of them we can't. So things like genetics or age or biological sex or the stressors in somebody's life or even their history We can't change any of those things. And yet it's fairly important to consider them when we write our program and when we're working with somebody. So we still want to know those things. Then what we have to look at is, well, what can we change and influence? And that's things like food intake, exercise, how they respond to the stressors in their life, the quality and quantity of sleep, what they're doing in their lifestyle beyond the times we see them at the gym. And then things like their habits, their attitudes, their belief systems, and what they do with the future. So we actually have an awful lot that we can change and influence. And most of those things you can see are going to be collaborative in nature. So yeah, I'm going to write a program, but you have to agree to show up and do it. Yes, I'm going to give you some guidance around food intake, but ultimately you're going to the grocery store on your own. You're making your meals on your own. You're going through the drive-through on your own. Like, as trainers, we're usually not present while our clients are eating. So what we recommend still has to be something that they agree to do and actually work on changing, right? We can give them recommendations about sleep and about how they respond to stress. But again, these are things happening beyond the time that they're spending in the gym with us. And so again, this idea of coaching and making recommendations and having a collaborative relationship around how we help them achieve results is really what we're looking for, okay? So there was some data a number of years ago that said 85% of clients are looking to achieve some weight loss. I wouldn't be surprised if that number was climbing a little bit. It doesn't necessarily mean that people are coming into us overweight or obese. Some people want to lose maybe 5 pounds or 10 pounds, but it's definitely a very, very, very common request when it comes to getting started with a personal trainer. So that's why we're going to kick off the day by looking at this one. So first of all, let's just kind of discuss what is weight loss. I sort of joke around. I have a little bit of a sense of humor. I joke around with people often, and they'll say something like, well, I want to lose 20 pounds as quickly as possible. And then I sort of joke around and I say, well, there's a chainsaw in the back. We could get rid of your left leg, and that would get you most of the way there. So that's funny. What we really mean when we are talking about weight loss is the desire to lose body fat and or reduce overall body weight. So like I said, clients might not be obese. They might only want to lose 5, 10, or 20 pounds. And what we just sort of understand is that the excess weight that they want to use is usually body fat. Now, I will share with you a really strange experience I had a couple of months ago. I went to teach in San Diego and had somebody come up to me at the end of the class. And she was asking about losing muscle mass specifically, because she used to be an athlete and she used to do a lot of strength and conditioning, and she was fairly, she had a decent amount of muscle mass. And she was now saying, well, she just wanted to get like smaller. So two things. Number one, and I don't really know how to say this without sounding judgmental. So I'm not trying to speak badly about someone behind their back, but throughout the weekend, I just kind of, she just seemed a little off. Like the questions she would ask or the way she would engage with people seemed a little bit strange. So I noticed that. And then secondly, as she was asking me these questions about, losing muscle mass, she had a little bit of an intensity to the conversation. And this, I'm bringing this up because to me, this was an example of, one, you're asking for something that I don't really believe in doing from a body transformation perspective. I think it's very valuable to gain muscle mass and to be healthy. So I don't know that I really want to get hired for something like I need to burn a ton of calories and lose a bunch of muscle mass. Like, to me, that already sounds like something pretty unhealthy. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, as we were talking, I was asking some questions. Sometimes you kind of just get the sense from somebody that they're asking questions, but they're not really listening to the answer. And they're kind of just, it's sort of like they're telling you what needs to happen. And the way I describe that is sort of being told how to do my job. And just in my experience, that doesn't work very well either, because if you know what to do and you want someone to hold you accountable to doing it because you're having trouble doing it. Well, it's kind of like your body's telling you that the thing you're trying to do doesn't feel very good. So for example, eating 800 to 1,000 calories a day and doing a ton of cardio probably doesn't feel very good. That's why you're tired. That's why you have food cravings. That's why it's difficult for you to resist, eating a bunch of food at the end of the day after you've been fasting all day. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because where there was this specific request around losing a significant amount of muscle gain, one, that's a strange request. And two, it's not what people usually mean when they say, I'd like to lose some weight. And I kind of am not sure that it should be what they're talking about if that's what they want to achieve. So when people say, I want to lose weight, what we're sort of saying we can help them do is lose excess body fat. I don't really want to talk about what it would take to lose a certain amount of muscle mass. That's not really what we do. That would be counter to health, right? A healthy body gains muscle under the conditions of, strength training and consuming enough calories. So we're not really going to talk about, well, let's go burn off a bunch of muscle. I don't know if that's making sense to everybody, but what we're going to look at is specifically, what are we going to do in our training? How are we going to make recommendations with nutrition and exercise in a way that is going to help someone achieve fat loss? That's what we're talking about. Okay? Share my screen here. There we go. Okay, so from there, if we know that a lot of people are going to want to do this, we really want to be careful to be doing it in a healthy, sustainable, supportive way, right? So again, remembering that 2 out of every 3 adults in the US are already considered overweight. That number actually went up again in a recent poll. I think it's 48% are considered overweight. This is where we're looking at a body mass index between 25 and 29.9. So the 48% is overweight and above. Okay, so for this classification is normally a question on the exam. They'll ask you what the BMI is that classifies as overweight. And so when it comes to achieving weight loss, we are looking at the 2 main principles, which are energy balance and hormone balance. So I'm going to say that again. There are 2 main principles for weight loss. One of them is energy balance, and one of them is hormone balance. Energy balance, you could simplify it and say calories in, calories out. And then hormonal balance would be related to what's happening in the endocrine system. So if we look at energy balance, it's actually a very, very, very simple equation. If we consume more calories than we burn, we're going to experience weight gain. And this is usually fat. It doesn't have to be, but that's usually the case. If we burn more calories than we consume, we see weight loss. And if we eat the same number of calories as we burn, then we would see no change. So the body weight would stay the same. So I want you to understand this as a fundamental physical law. So if we live here on Earth and we climb up to the top of a building and we jump over the edge of the building, 100 times out of 100, we fall. Now, depending on what we land on, that either causes problems or not. But the rule of gravity is that in the presence of gravity, if you jump off of a building, you would fall. It's the same thing with this law, and this law is called the law of thermodynamics. More calories consumed than burned equals storage. More calories burned than consumed equals depletion. Same calories in as out, no change. So with just as much certainty as the law of gravity, we know that this energy balance equation is correct. And then we also go and look at hormones. So I didn't say but. And it's a really important distinction. There's always going to be an energy balance calculation in how we help our clients manage body composition. And there's also going to be a hormone balance, okay? Hormones affect the functional capacity of the body and how it works. So for example, things like prolonged stress can increase and sustain stress-related hormones like cortisol. And if you remember back to day 5, chronically elevated levels of cortisol can lead to things like bone and muscle loss, visceral fat storage, increased blood pressure and hypertension, et cetera, right? So I've already given you a story about this. I told you about the insulin sensitive person who eats the plate of spaghetti, and I've told you about the insulin resistant person who eats the plate of spaghetti. So where the plate of spaghetti is the same number of calories, how the body uses insulin changes the result of those calories having been consumed, right? So that to me is sort of the story of the difference between the energy balance and the hormone balance. And that's why sometimes people think they're consuming very, very low calories, but they're still not losing weight. Well, because there are hormonal effects in the body that are determining what happens with fat storage. But even if we were to go back and look at that example, we see in the sort of side effects of elevated cortisol, we see muscle and bone loss while we see weight gain. So the person that's suffering from chronically elevated cortisol might be gaining fat, but if they're not eating a lot of calories, they are now also going to be losing some of the tissues in the body that are really important. They're going to be losing some muscle mass. They lose some of the minerals that help compose bone density. They're losing energy. They're losing efficacy. They're losing their ability to perform in terms of exercise, right? So even though they see it as I'm gaining, I have to eat less and less and less, they are actually gaining, but also losing things at the same time. And that's why the energy balance and the hormone balance are actually still both operating in that circumstance, okay? So it might sound funny, but sometimes to help someone lose weight, we actually have to get them to eat more than they're currently eating. But part of what we're asking them to do is eat more foods that have high levels of nutrients in them that the body needs to build the hormones that then help the body function better. Or we're asking them to eat higher quantities of food that help them regulate their hormones properly. So that's really important. If I don't eat enough protein and I eat a ton of very, very simple sugars, how insulin is acting in my body is going to cause weight gain. Whereas the same number of calories of protein and the same number of calories of carbohydrates, they don't necessarily act the same way in the body, even though they have the same caloric value. So we're going to be moving on into looking at nutrition after the program design section. So we'll talk more about that. But let's get back into the program design stuff. So we already talked about hormones increasing fat metabolism. So cortisol accelerates lipolysis, which increases the release of free fatty acids into the blood so they can be taken up by cells and used for energy production. Levels peak and return to near normal during prolonged exercise. But when we live in this state of chronically elevated stress, it's essentially pumping more sugar into the blood on a regular basis, which then stimulates insulin production, which then leads us down this road towards being insulin resistant. So growth hormone, catecholamines, they take over cortisol's role in releasing free fatty acids into the blood. And so the exercise strategies that we're going to use for weight loss, it's actually pretty easy. Any form of exercise can lead to initial weight loss as long as we are also considering nutrition, right? So if I start exercising and I'm now burning more calories every day, but I'm also burning more calories every day, so now I'm hungry and I'm eating more, I'm not going to lose weight. So the key for sustained loss for clients, especially if they have a large amount to lose, is actually periodization to increase intensity over time, because increasing the intensity increases the metabolic demand and it gives us an appropriate response in terms of hormone levels, right? So we can train with traditional, progressive, or hybrid styles. They all work because they all burn calories. And in all three styles, we can manipulate intensity, okay? So where traditional exercise for weight loss would be mostly cardio, and one of the benefits of looking at it that way is because you can do it anywhere. There's little to no equipment required, especially if you're looking at walking or running or biking or swimming or any of those kinds of things. And there is certainly the perception for people that prefer a traditional approach that they're in constant motion. And so then they think they're doing more. They sort of think if they get a really big sweat on, that's going to help, right? We also want to incorporate resistance training, or we would certainly recommend that they do so. And the added benefits of resistance training are specifically around building a little bit of lean body mass. So if by adding muscle mass, I'm now burning more calories, I'm even going to be burning more calories when the body's at rest. And so even if I don't work out one day, or even while I'm sleeping, I'm burning more energy if I'm incorporating resistance training compared to only doing cardio alone, okay? If we talk about progressive workouts, now we're looking at things like using games, agility, or circuits with more free weight movements. For a lot of clients, this is more fun or play-like, and it feels a little bit less like working out. And so if it's a more fun way of getting their heart rate up and getting them moving, then sometimes that means they're more compliant, which means they will stick around. They will keep training with you for longer, right? Hybrid then is a combination of those two. So we could have cardio or free weight movement circuits. We could have some games or some racks dispersed throughout. So again, when it comes to programming, lots and lots of different options. Ultimately, what it's going to come down to for me is kind of a couple of things. So we'll come back to this page in a second, because it's one of the pages that I've added for you. When we think about weight loss, if it's energy balance and hormone balance, then when our clients come to exercise, we do want them burning more energy. So one of the ways to think about that would be, where's their heart rate? So if we create a workout where their heart rate stays at least a little bit more elevated throughout the program, then that'll make sense for weight loss, right? Whether they're lifting weights or whether they're doing more cardio or more body weight stuff, it doesn't really matter. It's all keeping their heart rate up. That's why circuit style programming can be very popular for weight loss for that reason, because it tends to keep the heart rate more elevated, right? Instead of a set of exercise, rest, and then another set, rest, and then another set, rest, right? So circuits can be really good for weight loss. And then the idea of progression over time. So if I am just getting started, simple things are going to drive my heart rate up. But at the point where I get more aerobically conditioned, those same simple things are not going to drive my heart rate up as much anymore. And so that's why I need to apply progression. So whether that's extra reps, a little bit more weight, adding another set of exercise, adding some additional exercises, or even adding a whole nother day of the week. We want to add more volume, we want to add more intensity, and that will allow us to progress over time, okay? When we go back to the screen that I have here, I added in just kind of some extra things. I noticed at a certain point that I kind of give all these different types of anecdotes, but you don't necessarily get to write them down while we're talking about whatever chapter the anecdote comes from. So I kind of just went back through my notes and pulled in like a, sort of a bullet point list of all of the things that we mention in these various client stories that we share. So when it comes down to coaching strategies for weight loss, some of these things are going to actually happen in the gym in the session, but a lot of them are actually going to happen outside of that. And so it's going to come down to communicating with our clients to help with making some of these recommendations. So on the nutrition side, which again, we will talk more about next week. On the nutrition side, some of the things that we might do to help our clients achieve weight loss, one of the most fundamentally beneficial ways, the research shows one of the best ways to achieve weight loss is to learn how to log your food. So whether that's writing it down on a piece of paper or these days using an app, logging your food allows you to take a look at that energy balance in a pretty specific way, because you're literally keeping track of the number of calories you're putting in. So we will do some weight loss math when we get to the nutrition section. And ideally, what we'd be able to do for each client is give them an idea of the number of calories they should actually be consuming. And then from there, as they log their food, they're sort of counting up towards what that total number is for the day, right? So logging food can be very helpful. There are some cases where that's not appropriate for the person that we're working with, and it might just be around sort of fixation or mental health. So it's certainly not the only way to do it, but it can be a useful and helpful way. Um, Things like Weight Watchers, which is a very popular program. Weight Watchers is a food logging uh, scheme. It's just they don't log calories, they log points that are representative of the total number of calories. But instead of having to count your way all the way up to 2,000, maybe you're just counting your way up to 25 or whatever. But those are examples of things that work really well because there's lots of data points about them over time. If we were to look beyond logging food, some of the other things that can really help, one of them is actually just drink more water. The body is 60 to 70% water. And if we get dehydrated, it affects hormone balance and it affects how the body functions. Drinking more water also helps us feel a little bit more full. I remember watching the first season of Survivor, and one of the guys on the show was like, I'm so hungry, but I'm just going to drink a bunch of water and fill up my stomach and trick my brain. So drinking more water can be good from that perspective. But then also because it just helps improve digestion. So a lot of times mismanaging the breakdown of food can contribute towards some of the issues around food absorption and proper nutrition. So drinking more water can actually just help improve the quality of digestion for our clients as well. Portion size is another really big one. Eating the foods that we like, but just eating them in reasonable portions. So when we teach clients, like, hey, do you like avocado? Yeah, I sure do. Okay, cool. When you eat an avocado, how much do you eat? Well, like a whole avocado. Okay, well, that's 4 servings. So starting to teach things like, a serving of avocado is 1/4. A serving of almonds is maybe 8 to 10 nuts. A serving of salad, you want to take 2 big giant handfuls of leafy greens. So teaching our clients portion sizes can be really, really helpful because we're not turning their life upside down, asking them to eat in a different way. We're just asking them to pay attention to how much of something they eat. Another thing that I like a lot, I actually kind of stole the idea from a book. There was a men's health book that got put out and it was called Eat This, Not That. And what it did was it kind of said, let's say that you really, really, really want a burger. Well, if you go to A&W, there's actually more protein and less fat in an A&W burger than if you go to Burger King and get a Whopper. So if for some reason you're really, really, really married to the idea of eating a fast food burger every Wednesday, well, if you switch to A&W instead of Burger King, you would actually save, and they calculate it out, but they say something like over the course of a year, that's 560 grams of fat less. And that actually accounts for 5 pounds of weight loss or something. So Eat This, Not That can be really helpful for clients too, because again, a lot of times what they're eating just doesn't really fit into their meal plan very well. I think back to when I was growing up, I ate a giant bowl of Cheerios with milk and brown sugar, as well as 2 pieces of toast with cinnamon, sugar, and butter on top every day. Now that worked for me because I played like 6 hours of soccer a day. But for example, it didn't really have any protein in it. So every day for breakfast, I was eating a giant pile of carbohydrates. Well, no wonder I was hungry 2 hours later. No wonder my 8 a.m. class was not my best grades, right? So when it comes to calories, but also just macronutrient breakdown, sometimes it can be helpful to say, hey, instead of eating a giant bowl of Cheerios with brown sugar on it, what if you had a bowl of oatmeal and added in a scoop of protein powder, right? Again, this is sort of where collaboration is going to come into play because your client definitely wants to have some input around what they enjoy eating. So like if they just really, really, really need to eat a fast food burger, okay, well, this one would be a healthier option than that one. Or can you hold the cheese? Or can you say, hold the mayo or whatever, right? Meal replacements, learning to meal prep, reading food labels, learning to customize your order when you go out to eat, and even navigating holidays and social events. Meal replacements is like actually drinking a protein shake instead of a meal or something like that. And then the rest of them are sort of learning how to make adjustments to the sort of food lifestyle. So I just want to be clear about one thing. I would not use all of these things at once with a client. I would definitely pick one thing, or I would let them pick one thing, and we would work on one thing at a time, so that we don't get really overwhelmed. But when it comes to working with people on weight loss, it's not just going to be, okay, we'll eat more salad and work out 3 times a week. There's actually a lot of things that we can do. We just have to be willing to keep the conversation open. Okay. On the other side of the page, when we look at physical activity, what I mean here is physical activity besides the workouts that they're going to be doing. So they're going to work out with us, but every little bit of energy burned counts, right? If you start working out a couple of times a week and now you're so tired that you lie on the couch at every other moment possible, you're not actually really going to be burning more calories than you were before. So looking at things like tracking your steps, if you wear a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or a pedometer or something, sort of trying to make sure that we get to a minimum number of steps each day. And then how would we accomplish that? Well, what if you park further away? If you park at the back of the parking lot instead of at the front of the parking lot when you go to work or when you go to the grocery store. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. Or let's say you have a client that lives downtown. Instead of driving to work, maybe they actually live close enough that they could walk or maybe ride their bike to work. If they take the bus, have them get off one bus stop earlier so that they walk a little bit further. Can they go for a walk at lunch on their lunch break? Do they have a pet? Can they walk the dog? Can they play with their kids? Maybe you want them to join a team or take up a physical hobby like a learn to run group and sign up for a race or something like that. And even just being in BC, can you get outside and hike and bike and kayak and swim and, run and whatever. So I think when we look at sort of talking to weight loss clients, maybe a year later, 2 years later, it's not just that they dieted for 6 months and went to the gym every day. It's that they actually started to make changes in their lifestyle. I had a really lovely message from a client that I worked with years and years ago. She had actually sent me a message asking for my advice about a yoga mat. So sure, I gave her what I thought. But one of the things that she said is, I decided to try some yoga. I wanted to do it before, but I was way too intimidated, I didn't think I was flexible enough, and I didn't think that I'd be able to do it. When you see magazines of yoga people, they're all really skinny, and I had a lot of weight to lose at the time. But we trained together in the gym, and I had said to her all those years ago, and she reminded me of it when she sent me this message. She said, "You told me a lot of years ago that I might have to find new friends that liked fitness and that did things other than drink and eat." And so here I am all these years later. I go to spin with Anthony and Anissa and Teresa, and I did the 5K turkey trot with my neighbor, on Thanksgiving weekend, and now I'm taking up yoga. And so, I mean, it's easily been 10 years since we worked together. And 10 years later, after she's lost a lot of weight and done a little bit of yo-yoing and whatever, now 10 years later, she's finally able to look at her life and go, wow, I have a very different life now than when I was 80 pounds overweight. I have a different job. I have different friends. I relax differently. I don't come home and watch a movie and eat a tub of ice cream. I go for a walk in the park, right? So, it's like, yeah, it's calories in and out, and it's hormone balance, and it's exercise and macronutrients, but like our clients are either going to engage in a healthy lifestyle 24/7 or having a not so healthy lifestyle 23 hours of the day and then coming and working out for 1 hour. Like that doesn't work. That doesn't balance, right? So we've got to be willing to support them in more ways than just that 1 hour at the gym. So maybe take a screenshot of this page because it's something I added. And I'm sure you could all add more things to this list that you would similarly be able to support your clients in doing. Okay, so any questions about the weight loss content before we move on to the next section?
Logan?
Yes.
Will we be able to prescribe like diet plans, or are we not able to do that because we're not dietitians?
That's a good question. It will depend on where you go to work.
Oh,
So, for example, with the Fitness World gyms, one of the things you do in your onboarding is you complete a certification called .fit, and that gives you additional scope of ability to help create menus for your client. So that would then allow you to do more customized things, and it would allow you to talk more widely about it with your clients. If you get certified and you just work on your own, or you work at a gym that doesn't provide you with that, there is limited content that you're allowed to discuss and support your clients with. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the nutrition section. But yeah, it depends on education and resources. We usually recommend that anyone interested in more nutrition stuff looks at the Precision Nutrition course. And so if you were a trainer on your own, but you had done precision nutrition, then you would be able to talk more about nutrition than just what your CPT alone allows.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the baseline here that we give you is a starting point. But to really support your clients properly, you're going to have to either learn more, or you're going to have to work in an environment where they already support more nutritional resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Good question. Okay, cool. Then let's move on into lean body mass as the next section. So when we talk about lean body mass, what we actually mean is the desire to increase muscle mass or get bigger, add more definition to muscles. And so the scientific term for that is hypertrophy, which actually means the increased size of muscle fibers, or the increase in number and or size of the myofibril proteins like actin and myosin. So the actual smallest units of muscle fibers, we want more of them, or we want them to become bigger. So this is specifically related to increasing muscle tissue. Now, we have to engage in resistance training in order to do this. You cannot just sit on the couch and eat a lot of food and have your muscles grow bigger. So skeletal muscles are one of the few tissues in the body that can actually repair and or regenerate itself. And so resistance training is vital to increasing lean body mass, because it provides the type of stress needed to promote the growth of muscle cells. So when we talk about what hypertrophy is, it's actually a sort of micro breakdown, or a micro tearing, if you will, of those little tiny muscle fibers. So we actually kind of damage the body a little bit in a positively adapting way. And then when we eat food and when we sleep and when we allow the hormone profile to reset itself, then those tissues repair and or we're able to grow new ones. So inherent in the concept of building up the body is actually that at appropriate intervals, we have to break it down a little bit. And so if we do that, then we have a chance, based on nutrition and hormone profile, then we have a chance to grow, okay? So again, if we look at the energy balance equation, more calories consumed than burned means we're gonna gain, but what we want is to gain muscle. So again, if we just eat a bunch of donuts, we'll gain weight, but not the type we want. So in order to actually look at gaining muscle mass, the typical recommendation is multiple meals per day, typically 4 to 6. And what that does is help sustain an insulin response that drives protein synthesis. So if I were to eat all the calories I needed at one time in the day, I wouldn't get as effective a muscle gain result as if I were to break up my food consumption in those 4 to 6 meals. Part of what we also see is this window of opportunity where in the 90 minutes after a workout, cells need the most replenishment of nutrient. And so taking in carbohydrates and proteins at the time of the workout's completion is where we can stimulate recovery and protein synthesis to help with that recovery and repair process, okay? Now, when we look at the hormonal response, in order to generate testosterone and growth hormone, which helps build muscle tissue, we need to lift again with higher volume at moderate to high intensity. So 70 to 80%, 85% of the maximal effort is what's recommended for hypertrophy. And we also want those shorter rest intervals. So I think I was telling you all that one of the things I do if I get someone who asks for muscle gain is I just don't let them stand around as much. So kind of that 30 to 60-second window where we go back in and we lift again, and we go back in and we lift again, that's creating the hormone response that creates muscle gain. So for people that stand around and talk too long in between sets, they're not going to get the same results, right? Also, placing stress on larger muscle mass will do the job. So squats and deadlifts and press, pushing, pulling, those bigger muscle group exercises are going to be what we want to see the program made up of. And then things like calves and biceps and triceps and whatever, they need to be accessories, but the majority of the hormone response is going to come from the exercises that we do on those bigger muscle groups. So then when it comes to exercise strategies for lean body mass, again, any form of exercise can lead to an initial increase. The key is progressing into the higher volumes that are necessary over time. So we really do want to see periodization in order to increase intensity and volume on the body. That increased physical stress is going to change hormone levels and give us the opportunity for growth. So when we go and look at Trainerize, I'm going to pull one up here for a second so you can take a look. When you first build a workout, it has reps, set ranges, and whatnot, and that's good. But if we had someone that was really trying to achieve hypertrophy, what we would want to make sure that we're doing is actually using the advanced workout builder. And that is going to give us the opportunity to write in their progression over time. So if I pull up a client that has that loaded, let's take a look here. Sorry, I need to share my screen. There we go. Okay, so if I take a look at a client that I'm pretty sure I've created progression for, maybe, let's see. Oh, I haven't, but nonetheless, this is where it would be. Okay, so what you can see is that I've got the program set already. This is day 1, day 2. If I go to edit and I go to advanced, let's say I took this client from the sensory motor phase and I'm now moving them into the force phase. I want there to be a bit of progression. On the first week, you can see how it says 3 sets of 10 to 12. If I wanted to, I could take the next week and I could change it. Maybe I want 3 sets of 8 to 10. And what I would be doing in that second week is increasing the weight. And then maybe on the third week, I would do 6 to 8. And again, I would be looking to increase the weight. So that would be a place where I can create progression over time. And what that means is that that's sort of part of how I'm creating the program. So when my client actually opens up the app, it's literally prompting them to do more. Or it's saying, last time you did 3 sets of 12 with this weight. Okay, well, now this time you can take the weight up. So when I talk about not writing programs on napkins and not getting lazy, part of what I mean is that in a lean body mass program, if you're not keeping track of the volume of the exercise, which would be weights versus reps, if we're not paying attention to the volume of the exercise and we're not increasing that volume over time, then the science of the program is not going to yield muscle gain, right? If we just do 3 times 12 with 8-pound dumbbells every week for 6 weeks in a row, they're not going to build muscle mass, or not much. Maybe they'll get a little bit of positive adaptation out of the first week or 2. And then after that, the body's like, okay, well, I can do this. This isn't hard. This is not stressing me, right? So when we look at progression, when we look at the need for programs that require periodization, that's kind of a little bit what we're talking about. And I do like that Trainerize gives us the opportunity to program that ahead of time and to sort of keep track of the weights that we're lifting. In my last 3-week phase, I took my deadlifts 3 ramp sets and 3 working sets. So my working sets went from 142 up to 176. And that's for sort of 10 to 12 reps. So if I'm not paying attention to how much weight I'm lifting, I actually remember the workout on Sunday. I was feeling a little bit tired. It would have been really, really easy for me to just put like 142 on the bar and rep it out. But I had done 161 the week before, so I had to try to go up a little bit heavier. So if we're not keeping track of that, what we know out of the human research is that humans will self-select the weight lower, which means if you don't have the weight progression written in and you're like, oh, do what feels good, they will lift lighter than they're supposed to. I think the exception to that rule is maybe young men in their 20s. They often have the tendency to lift more than they should based on their form and technique, but that's a joke and I'm not calling anyone out in particular. Similarly, if I was trying to get stronger and I used proper progression, I would lift I would lift the right weights instead of lifting too heavy, right? So measuring progression kind of halts ego lifting just as much as it helps promote doing the right amount of work, okay? Okay, so then with the 3 styles, let's be very clear here. Traditional, progressive, and hybrid all work because they induce stress to the body and we can manipulate intensity and volume. So progressive and hybrid can be used to gain lean body mass. At a certain point, some of the types of exercises that we see in those programs are a little bit more integrated instead of isolated. And so what I find is, let's say we were to compare the leg extension machine with walking lunges, okay? Which of those 2 exercises would you say is harder to do? The leg extension machine or walking lunges? Stephanie, just unmute yourself there. I couldn't hear you.
I feel it's a walking lunges.
Okay, why do you think walking lunges are harder?
Because you have to engage your core, your upper part of the body. Also, you have to do your legs exercise and then you add on, you load your weight. So
Yeah.
I feel it's more like it's a whole body's workout.
For sure, yeah. I would agree with you. And so what we talk about sometimes is you can make the leg extension machine hard by going heavy, but you're only working one little movement. You're extending your knee, that's it. So if you did leg extensions very heavy, you would be working that one movement or the muscles that contribute to that one movement. You'd be working them at a very high intensity, but the overall load on your body is much lower because every other part of your body is kind of resting, right?
You
Whereas
have to engage your core though to do that?
Well, you should, certainly.
Correct.
Yep. And in fact, when I use machines, I do actually try to brace up as much of my body as I can. But if I do, let's say I do 200 pounds on the leg extension, or I hold 50 pounds in each hand doing walking lunges, for sure the lunges feel harder, without a doubt. And so when we talk about traditional versus progressive, there's this idea that traditional yields muscle gain because you can, I don't know, target the individual muscles and you can build up a lot of volume in one part of the body. And you're not wrong, but you can also build up volume and intensity in a progressive program. You can also load total body movements. I would sort of argue that that's harder. Like, is it harder to do a heavy leg extension or a heavy barbell back squat? Well, it's harder to do a heavy barbell back squat. And especially because you can do a heavy barbell back squat at a much higher weight than you can do heavy leg extensions, right? So if someone prefers a traditional program, that's fine. And you can give them a traditional program. I don't want to say that when I see bodybuilders at the gym, they look like they're dogging it and they're not working very hard. They look like they're working very hard, don't get me wrong. But sometimes you can take someone who's got a pretty big, strong back squat and you ask them to do walking lunges and they're not very good at walking lunges. So there's components of balance and stability and mobility and integration that don't necessarily get challenged in a traditional style program. And so there's parts of the body that are not having volume and intensity applied, right? Now, if your goal is to go be Mr. Olympia one day, you probably need to do a traditional program. But if your goal is to gain muscle mass and get stronger in sort of like a, I want to be able to do a lot of different things, I want to gain some strength, I want to get a little bit bigger, it's totally possible to achieve that goal by following a hybrid or progressive program. So I do think there's a limit to what you can do to your body with a progressive or a hybrid program. I can't do walking lunges with a 400-pound barbell on my back, and I wouldn't even want to try. But for most of our clients who are probably not going to be chasing Mr. Olympia, we could give them a hybrid or progressive program and still help them achieve muscle gain. So that's a very important thing to remember. If someone comes to us and they're like, yeah, I really want to gain some muscle mass, but I tend to have a really hard time sticking to the program. I find it, kind of boring. Okay, well then if we did something more hybrid or progressive, we could definitely engage them in a way that would sort of be a better match for their movement style, but we can also still assure them that we can deliver them the result of gaining muscle. So I keep waiting for the day when a trainer helps me with a lean body mass gain goal and a progressive program. Because normally when I ask them for that, they put me on a traditional program and I quit fairly quickly because it's boring and I don't like it. Right? So we just got to remember that all those movement styles are available. Now, when we talk about traditional programming, we do tend to look at more of a split routine using fixed body supported exercise for each body part or muscle. So a good example would be like day 1 is going to be chest and back, day 2 is legs, day 3 is shoulders and arms. So that would be an example of a more traditional program. And you can even tell in the language that it's somewhat isolated. If we looked at progressive programming, we might use more free weight, multiplanar, unsupported, and total body movements. And here's where we have to consider the client's definition of lean body mass. For a lot of them, a progressive program would actually give them what they want. But for some of them, that won't take them far enough. What they will want is a traditional program in the long run, okay? Hybrid combines the aspects of both, so both total body movements as well as isolated and supported movements. You can do split routine or total body workouts. You can have one total body workout and then an upper body day and a lower body day. I do really like hybrid because it allows us to do so many different things. And even for someone who is a pretty serious bodybuilder, and Yvette, I'm going to use you as an example. If you were going to ask to train with me, I would certainly understand that your sport demands a more traditional approach. But if we were to incorporate some frontal plane movements and some multiplanar movements, it would really help strengthen your core and it would give you some of that functionality back that I think would help you eliminate some of the pain or discomfort you have based on posture, based on performing your sport in the same way over and over again for a lot of years, right? So I would still give you lots of things that you're familiar with and that you expect, but I would also sprinkle in some stuff that you're not used to, and we would work on getting better at those things over time, right? So when we're building a program, and if we use Yvette as an example, there might be a barbell bench press, and then a dumbbell chest fly, and then a TRX row. And then we might do the chest press machine, and then we might do an elevated narrow grip push-up, and then we might have a side plank with a cable row. So I'm giving you 2 traditional things, and then I'm giving you 1 progressive thing. And I'm building little sets out of just starting to sprinkle in some stuff that you wouldn't normally choose to do on your own, right? So definitely something to think about if we're doing traditional work. In my experience, traditional work by itself has a few holes in it from the perspective of really balanced myofascial fitness. And what that tends to lead to is pain and injury over time, right? So I can train someone to gain muscle mass, but I want to do it in a way that keeps them safe and prevents them from getting injured. So I want to sprinkle in a little bit of hybrid stuff whenever I can. How do we feel about that?
That's good.
Would you show up and do that program, Yvette?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Definitely. I'm open to anything. Yeah.
Good. And it would be nice if every client was so open-minded. Sometimes we have to earn the right for that, right? We have to give them what they want so that we can earn the right to show them some new things. But the thing to think about is the more frequent stimulation with adequate recovery produces the sustained increases in hormonal response and protein synthesis necessary for adding lean body mass. We should be able to do that in all three types of programs. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Get myself organized here. I pushed a button and my screen disappeared. There we go. Okay. All right, cool. So if we look at a split routine versus a total body, one of the benefits is it increases the amount of work done in one area of the body at one time. However, if you miss a day, you're missing an entire chunk of your body. So we have to sort of keep that in mind. Let's say I'm training my client and we do upper body together one day and lower body together one day, and then I write them a third day to do on their own and they're supposed to do arms. Well, if they don't do that day, then we're vastly falling below the volume and intensity that we would need in order to make some changes happen in the body, right? So the split routine, I think for people that kind of get into the pattern of doing that, it can sort of feel like a big accomplishment because I get a bunch done in one area on one day, and it makes me feel a little bit sore the next day. And then maybe that's sort of the feeling of getting done what needed to be done, right? And it does mean less overall stress at one time on certain areas of the body. So maybe in a split routine, I can train my legs, and then a couple days later I train my arms, and then a couple days after that I train legs again. What that means is my legs had more time to recover compared to doing a total body workout every other day. And so again, if we're training with a lot of volume, that can definitely be one of the reasons for making that choice. Okay. Questions about lean body mass gain? All right, so what I would suggest is if you go look in the BCPTI program, which I may have to just send to you as trainers because I think right now it's in your client account and I don't think it allows you to go back and look at the previous phase. So you may have to remind me to do that. But if you go back and look at it, we have a couple of workouts that are fairly circuit machine based. They were designed to help the students here kind of get comfortable with the machines that we had. And then we did that animal flow and kettlebell one. So Yvette and Renee and then the NIMO students did that one with me on Saturday, and the day class students did that a couple of weeks ago. So that was a very progressive style workout. Yvette, do you want to share a little bit about how that workout felt or how it challenged you maybe?
Yeah, it was, I really, really enjoyed it. It was tough though. Like it was, yeah, it was really tough, but I'd love to do it again. Like I thought it was a really, really good all-rounded workout.
Yeah, so it used the whole body versus specific body parts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that you would notice out of the BCPTI program is there's workouts that are definitely more traditional, like the circuit ones are push, pull, and leg based. And then the kettlebell and animal flow one is the whole body in a multiplanar experience. So what I do want you to do is to play around with and practice and gain a certain amount of comfort with creating workouts of different styles, right? So when I hire a trainer, one of the things that I often have them do for me as kind of like a little bit of homework is you have to write me a 2-day program for someone who wants to lose weight. And then you have to write me a 3-day program for someone who wants to gain muscle. And then you have to write me a 3-day-a-week program for someone who wants to lose weight. And then you have to write me a 4-day-a-week program for someone that wants to gain muscle. Because those are kind of generic requests, right? Like weight loss, we typically see people coming in 2 to 3 times a week. Muscle gain, hopefully they're coming in at least 3 days a week, if not 4. So then for you as a trainer, can you write like one phase? Can you write 4 to 6 weeks? Which it's not like every time they come work out, you have to have them do a completely different set of exercises. Like often day 1, day 2, day 3, we're going to repeat that for a few weeks, right? But I would say that at this point in the course, what you want to do is start to play around with that exercise library, and you want to try creating a workout that you think would be good for weight loss. You want to try creating a workout that you think would be good for muscle gain, because you have to kind of go through the reps.
Can I ask you a question, Yvette? If you don't mind. Oh, oops, I can't
Yeah,
hear you.
yeah, go
Oh,
ahead,
yeah,
yeah.
good, thanks. I was wondering because I'm new to, making programs. So I was wondering, you are more expert about like gaining muscle program, like Logan said, 3-day muscle gain program. Would you like write like first day it's like chest, second day it's leg or something like that? That's what would you do?
That's what I usually do.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do muscle groups individually per day, but I do change it up. Sometimes I'll do like back and triceps, chest and biceps, or I'll do a push pull. So I do kind of mix it as well. Like I don't always just stick to the same, like because I kind of get bored too of just doing the same old thing all the time.
Yeah.
And it kind of changes the routine and that kind of thing too. But legs are always separate. I always do legs. I do legs 2 times a week. So I do a quad priority leg and then a hamstring and glute priority leg.
Oh,
And then sometimes I'll just do a separate glute, like with shoulders or something,
mm,
or arms, or you know, something like that. Sometimes I'll do shoulders and arms together. But yeah, like you, I would definitely do that as well, like a chest, like a
okay.
back, chest, legs, arms, that kind of thing, and you know, another leg, and then start over again.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So if
yeah.
it's like a 3-day program a week, you'd write like maybe
If I
leg
would
one
do a
day.
if I
Yeah.
would do a 3-day program for lean muscle building, you would have to almost do like a leg workout separate,
Mhm,
and then an upper body, so like a push one day and a pull the next day, because
Okay.
you want to fill it, you want to use all those muscle groups
All
if you're
those
only
muscles.
training 3 days
Yeah.
a week. And then your
Mhm.
leg workout would include, at least I think, is my opinion, would include both quads and hamstrings and glutes,
Okay.
kind of a mixture of everything.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you would go to, if you were to make it, you would go to Trainerize and try to find those exercise that is applicable to targeted
Yeah.
muscle, and
Yeah.
then build the program like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Okay,
how I think I would do it. Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Right now I
really
train
helpful.
6 days a week. I only take one day off.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I, you know,
working
sometimes if I
hard.
do a push pull during the week, then I just do it twice, but I varied it, the exercises, I change it up, or do cardio in with it sometimes, or some
Mhm.
abs with it, or, you know, just change up the exercises. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds good. This is so
Yeah.
helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. How many workouts do you do in a week?
These days
For
I
your
only do maybe 3 times, but last year when I started, I used to do 5, 6 days a
Yeah.
week. And I also did practice instead of training, just wanted to, learn the move.
Yeah. Yeah.
I practice, so I went to the gym twice a day, but now I'm doing so.
Yeah.
I'm reducing the gym time and trying to focus on studying and pass,
Yeah.
because I studied earlier than you guys. So my expiration date is coming very soon. So
Oh, I see.
like
Okay.
my PTA Global already says I'm supposed to finish studying, but I still have a little bit of time frame before I have to take the test, before I have to renew.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm
Right.
trying to focus now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah. Because you have
One thing at a
180
time.
days to write the test, right? With
180 days,
or
yeah,
all together. Yeah.
all together, yeah. Because I
Yeah.
studied in June, so
Oh, wow. Really?
late June, but yeah, still.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's been a while then for you. Yeah. Yeah. I was trying to find the kettlebell workout that she was talking about that we did on the weekend, but I don't know.
Oh,
On Trainerize, I don't, would you look under shared program or under,
yeah, I
I'm so
wonder.
bad at this.
It's all new things for us. So.
Oh, yeah, especially from, yeah.
Okay. I knew better than to try to turn the video on. It kicked me out again. All right. Okay, so that's wellness. Questions on that? So I know it seems a little bit theoretical and simple. That is, I am spending a little bit of extra time to go over it, because when things are theoretical and simple, that's the kind of thing they can ask you questions about on the exam, right? So that's why some of this stuff will have some stars beside it and some exam questions. But from there, the fourth goal to talk about is the sports conditioning. So let's carry on into this last section here. So sports conditioning, there's a whole lot more that goes into this, and I would suggest that if you're interested in training athletes, that you probably want to do some extra education, because there's a lot to it. So if you wanted to do the NSCA, Certified Strength and Conditioning Coach, that's kind of the standard for that level of trainer. Because when we're preparing athletes, we have to look at a much more systematic preparation process that has a maximum transfer into specific sport or activity, both year round or even across multi-year stages of training. So we will talk a little bit about it so that we can kind of frame up what we're looking at. Sports conditioning is going to consist of two distinct aspects. We've got training, which is enhancing the physical and mental condition of the athlete, and that's what we do in the gym. We're training. And then there's also practice, which is perfecting the technical skills and the techniques demanded by the sport. So there are a couple of athletes that perform their sport in the gym, power lifters, maybe CrossFit athletes, that kind of thing. But otherwise, practice is out on the field, or it's on the court, or it's on the ice. And so if we're training someone that's performing their sport outside of the gym, we do have to be a little bit aware of the total amount of work that they're doing, right? I would say that my own experience as an athlete, I was training a lot, and there were definitely periods of time where I was overtraining, and that had some detrimental effects, right? So things to think about is just sort of the work to rest balance. Like when you're training and practicing, you're physically active at high intensities a lot more. And so what we want to be thinking about is, well, how's the athlete's structural alignment? Is their posture good? Are they able to get to stacked and safe positions? You'd be surprised how much the answer to that is no when we do assessments on athletes. We also want to understand this concept of dynamic stability. So if I'm playing soccer and I'm running down the field, it's different than if I'm a track athlete and I'm running down the track. The track athlete gets to stay in their own lane, and they're going to run from the beginning of the race to the end. Whereas a soccer athlete has an opponent, there's a ball, you're spinning around in space, there's 360 degrees of field. And so it's really important for a soccer player to have dynamic stability, because every time they change directions or change the plane of motion they're moving in, the joints have to be stable in order to resist against injury, right? And then when we look at things like strength for an athlete, we actually have to break that down a little bit, because there's speed strength, there's relative strength, which is how strong they are related to their own body weight. There's endurance strength, which is how long they can do something hard for, right? So think about rowing. If you're really strong, but you can only last at that amount of strength for 10 seconds, well, what if the race is 2 minutes long? You're useless, right? And then we also have strength. We also have sports that require max strength, like wrestling, or wrestling has an endurance component as well, but max strength is something that's going to sort of bring an extra layer of performance to the sport that you're doing. So there's different layers of strength, and then there's also this idea of power, and that's that rapid excitation of the nervous system that allows me to be explosive, right? So there's a power component to speed. And so we've got to train for these things in a different way compared to just your average, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds type person, right? So it starts to get a little bit complicated from here. And the reality is there's not a ton on the exam as we get into this next section of notes. But what's important is the needs analysis and then the individualization of a program for an athlete. So based on their training history, based on their injury history, based on how they move, I'm going to train my athletes in different ways. And I also have to individualize their program based on the sport they're playing, based on where they are in their training season, based on how much additional exercise they're doing beyond the training. So you're going to be gathering a lot more information if you're working with athletes, okay? We talked about this pyramid a while back when we first got into program design. Often for an athlete, they're working on skill and technique as a part of their training. But again, what I'll just reiterate is this bottom foundational layer of function is really, really important, because if they don't have good squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, carry function, they're not going to be able to add complexity or volume or intensity on top of that. So where I've done a lot of training of athletes, I would say the majority of what I've done is actually function. And that's kind of the majority of what I do with anybody, because at least for the work that I like to do, I'm often working with an athlete who's having some issues with pain or injury. I'm not necessarily working out with them when they're at their peak performance. So at least for us, often when we work with an athlete, I think it serves us very well to go back and look at that base layer of function, because if they don't have it, they're not even going to be training successfully at those levels higher up the pyramid, right? So I'm going to skip through a bunch of this stuff because I encourage you to come back to it if you decide that you want to get into training athletes, but also you'll need a lot more information than what PTA Global provides. So again, there's a little star here that shows up on specificity. That will be one of the things that they might ask you in the exam, is just, again, that an athlete will need a much more specific program based on their current function and the sport that they play. And everything else is pretty much the same. So what that leaves for you is the learning activities, 18.1 through to 18.4. So what those will do is give you a chance to practice at least the content that is exam relevant. So I encourage you to do those 4 learning activities. The last section of the notes is actually content that you would have already covered. I did it a little bit out of order the last time I put the notes together. So it's just a review of the program design model. So the 4 goals we've now covered: weight loss, lean muscle gain, wellness, and sports conditioning. And then what you'll see is the sensory, motor, force, and power phases. There's a little bit of description behind why they go in the order that they go. So you're probably familiar with that from having viewed the notes. Just remember those words from the perspective of the exam. You will be asked questions based on that vocabulary specifically versus the vocabulary that shows up in other models, okay? And then you'll also be asked based on lead off, transitional, or go ahead. And that is basically beginner, intermediate, advanced, but it's the PTA Global version of that same language. So the whole program design model is 4 levels, or sorry, 4 goals, 3 phases, 3 levels, and 3 styles. And so you want to make sure that you feel at least comfortable with the terminology that breaks down the model summary. Okay? Now, when we go from there into starting to write our own workouts, what the day class is doing is writing, they've been paired up. They have a schedule of when they're working with whom. And so they are now paired up and they are responsible for writing the workout that they're going to take their partner through when they come to open gym. So for you, I don't want to make it a requirement. I just want to make it a recommendation that sort of what I was mentioning around 2-day weight loss, 3-day weight loss, 3-day muscle gain, things like that. This is the time where we want to start to be practicing that a little bit. And if it's easy for you to do, if you have a friend that wants a free workout, or if you have someone that you work out with that is sort of your partner for all of this practicing stuff, I would suggest trying to run someone through a full workout at this point, okay? We have a couple of weeks of content left, obviously, and those of you that'll be here on Saturday, we'll definitely have an option to do a little bit more of that with Josh. But it's like at this point, now that we've covered the sort of strategy, the theory of program design, now we want you to be able to take a program out onto the gym floor and actually go through the time management process, right? So if I'm doing this many sets and this many reps and this much time in between, when I write a workout, am I writing a workout that can actually get done in the 50 to 60 minutes that I have? Or, oh my God, I don't have time to do 15 exercises because by the time I tell them what it is and I show them how to do it and then they get set up, like, oh my God, this was like an hour and a half long workout. So that's kind of the next step is write a workout, take someone to the gym. Those of you that are already training friends or clients, great. Maybe you're going to slightly rewrite their program now that you've learned some additional things. But that's kind of the next piece. The content on Thursday, I think, is manipulating workouts. and special populations. Yep. So then we get to talk about what do we do to exercises when we're working with people that are older adults, or they are pregnant, or they are obese. And so we would only modify a workout if we feel comfortable building one in the first place, right? So what I would suggest is that you want to do 18.1 through 18.4 for homework. And I also want you to create at least one workout on Trainerize. So you can create one for your demo client, or you can create a client account. You would just need to email it to somebody, right? So whether it's a friend or a family member, or if you have another email address that you want to use to make yourself a client, what I'd like you to do is create a client account and make a single workout. So a master workout, it doesn't have to be a master program, but a master workout, so that you can practice building that. If you get stuck, if you're not sure what to do, remember there's lots of templates inside of Trainerize, so you could take a look to get some ideas. But I don't want you to just import one and consider that your homework done. I actually want you to go through the steps of dragging and dropping the individual exercises into the workout. Okay? Does anybody have any questions about the content or the homework?
Do we have on the master workout that we're going to be designing, do we just do, like, do we pick like a lean body mass one, or a wellness one, or do you know what I mean? Like just anything, or?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. I might suggest naming the workout based on what you've picked. So if
Okay.
it's weight loss, sensory motor, hybrid, lead off, that might be a good name for the workout, because then it's helping you organize what you're doing.
Okay.
Or if it's lean body mass, traditional force, go ahead, like make that the name of your workout. And then you'll sort of, then I'll be able to identify, well, what's the theme, and
Yeah.
does it
Okay.
look like you've been able to accomplish that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So this lecture today, what chapter was this? Is this something that was just kind of like a review, more or less? Of
So
kind of
it
things
was
that
it was programming components C or components D and E, I think.
D and E,
No.
okay.
Nope, that's a lie. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong line on my syllabus. It was programming B and program design model.
Okay.
So like I said, it was a little bit of a review. We cite the program design model actually showed up ahead of this on your notes, but we sort of split it up into two different classes.
Okay.
Is there
Alright.
anything in the textbook or in the videos that you think I'm missing?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. We normally start off with programming, and then we go through SMR and stretch, core and racks. And then we look at the programming for the 4 goals, and then we get into manipulating workouts and special populations.
Okay.
So manipulating workouts allows us to get into things like a little bit more of the cardio programming stuff, some of the acute variables. We talk about in PTA Global, they talk about the gears and goals checklist and the daily readiness observation questionnaire. We don't use that, but we'll talk about how we put that same tool into practice. It's more based on just conversation and communication with your client versus a specific template. But we'll be talking about that at the next class. And then when you're here with Josh on Saturday, I'm pretty sure the content that you're looking at is the special population stuff, which is good because you want to actually be able to practice some of that. And for anyone who's interested in the CES program, which starts after this program finishes, Josh is the lead instructor for that. And part of what we look at in special populations is really expanded on in the corrective exercise course. Because obviously if you're modifying for someone who's older or someone who's had a little bit of injury, that's where the corrective exercise specialist really comes to play.
Oh, yeah.
So what I would like to see from everybody is a 6-phase dynamic warm-up, and then the working block based on the goal that you're programming for your client, right? And loosely speaking, 6-phase dynamic warm-up, it should be some kind of foam rolling, some kind of stretching, some kind of core activation, a couple of exercises for core activation, and then a little bit of the RAQS stuff just to get the body fired up so that we're ready to go train. That's technically not 6 phases, but I'm allowing a couple of the phases to get a little blurry based on the fact that we're new to programming and also writing programming for more beginner clients. That would probably be the place to start. Okay, cool. I'll leave it at that. There's probably going to be a couple videos that get uploaded in order for this one to get out to you guys, because I think every time it kicks me out, it stops the recording, but I'll do my best to get it up. If for some reason the recordings don't work at all, I'll send you a link from a previous course where we talked about the same content. And outside of that, I will see you all on Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.